Welcome to the Photographer Show TV studio, where I'm joined now by landscape photographer and super stage speaker Colin Prior. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Pleasure.
You have been speaking on the super stage, taking our audience here at the Photography Show on a journey through your experience as a landscape photographer. Just where did that experience for you begin? What was your starting point when you discovered that this was the medium that you would like to bring to life?
Well, I think when I was younger, I really had a deep passion for birds, but it became clear to me that I could see more about the natural world through the medium of landscape photography than I could through wildlife photography. And that, I think, was fundamentally down to the fact that often with wildlife photography, that fantastic picture is really... there's an element of luck in it.
Oh, yes.
You know, I'm not trying to deny the skills of wildlife photographers. I know how difficult it is, but often it's what the bird or the animal does that makes the picture fantastic. I mean, with the cameras you have today, 120 frames a second, and you've got to crawl through them, and maybe one of them is going to be that picture. And that's what you're able to do. You're able to capture images that were impossible before. But to go back to your question, I felt with landscape, what I was able to do was disassemble the elements of the landscape and reassemble them through the viewfinder of my camera.
Okay.
And it gave me more control to say what I wanted to say about landscape. So that was what differentiated my decision to become a landscape photographer.
That point on disassembly I find particularly interesting, and the format in which you shoot as well, these sweeping panorama shots. How does that concept, that idea of disassembling and recreating, does that have a relationship with that panorama format that your output is typically produced in?
Yeah, I think a lot of the photography that I've done with that format was at elevation. I was quite high in the mountains. Yeah. And the format lends itself very much to that type of photograph because it's got a natural crop of the foreground, and it allows you to experience the landscape in a way that you can't with a standard format. Yep. And also because that film was a film camera originally, yes. And I've moved away from that, but because of the size of the transparency, you were able to not only have an overview, if you like, but you could also scrutinize the detail within the picture in the way that you can with medium format digital cameras now. The resolution was there, and actually I feel great about the fact that I shot with that format because there's many of my peer group that shot with 35mm, and 35mm images scanned. There's nothing in them compared with even a consumer level digital camera. The quality of imagery coming out digital cameras now is so much greater than it was in the days of film. And because that camera used, it was essentially the slice of a 5x7 inch transparency on roll film. The quality of a big body of my work is the quality's in it because I used that format.
And maybe it's because of the subject, I don't know, but you look at your images now, and some of those images were taken a little while ago, but I only know that because I know your work. Whereas if you were looking at those unfamiliar with your work, you would think, that was taken last week, or that was taken a couple of years ago. They really do stand the test of time because of, I guess, the craft in which you employ, but also because of the subject matter.
Yeah, and there's certainly, very much more in the way of people that are doing that type of photography. They're going into the mountains and they're camping in and around the summits, and if you're up there overnight, you've done the work. The hard work's actually climbing up the mountain with the weight that you need to carry. Obviously, not just your camera equipment, but You need all your camping equipment and food and so forth. So it's no picnic, but when you get to the top, you can have a decent meal, and you can get a good rest, and you've got the opportunity, obviously, to shoot at sunset. But if you're camping, you're usually there for sunrise. It's a lot easier to shoot sunset and walk off the mountain.
Yes.
Because you don't need to carry that weight. You're only going to camp up there really for a sunrise. And the potential's always fantastic, because you never know quite what will happen in the morning. Sometimes you're lucky, and other times that cloud just needs to just be in the wrong place.
Yes.
That first 10 minutes of the sun, and if it crawls into a cloud, it's you're coming back again, and it's probably a year later.
Yeah, well, this takes us back to the beginning of our chat, about working with animals versus working with landscapes. At least with landscapes, there's a degree of predictability, but there is that animal-like quality in the clouds that can spoil or make, perhaps, some of the images that you capture.
Yeah, absolutely. There's chance. Even although you've pre-visualized the composition because you've probably been there before, you can never quite... You can never tell what you're going to get, and sometimes you can get an image that it rarely happens, but it supersedes what you hope to achieve. You just get a convergence of the elements that make that leap, and that's what great landscape photographs do. In fact, it's what all great photographs do. It's not so much what's in the photograph, it's where they take you.
Yes, indeed. And I find that to be very true, whether it's portraiture. It's what the subject looks like, but it's what you learn about them through that and it's difficult to put that into words. Just a couple of quick ones before we wrap up, Colin. I saw you in a film recently. You were in the Outer Hebrides, Western Isles, Lewis and Harris, and I know that's an environment you're very familiar with, but you've had an opportunity to travel all over the world capturing drama and beauty of landscapes. Is there somewhere that you keep being drawn back to, though?
Well, I'm finished this project now, but I've been travelling to Pakistan, into the Karakoram Mountains for over 20 years, and I managed to find commercial sponsorship which allowed me to do that as a single individual with a group of porters that you need to support yourself out there. But the Karakoram Mountains are like no others in the world. It's the character of them. It's a vertical landscape, and unlike the Himalayas, which are very, very impressive, they tend to be towers and minarets and cathedrals, and they're so vertical that they shed a lot of the snow. So instead of having big white masses, you've got the rock that breaks through, and the snow sits on your ridges and on weaknesses, essentially, in the mountains. And the opportunity for photography in that part of the world is, well, it's infinite. I mean, there's just so much in the way of graphics and shapes. I made 6 expeditions, month-long expeditions out there over that period of time, and the book, The Karakoram Ice Mountains of Pakistan, was published in February last year by Merrill, the publisher. So I was absolutely delighted to see it in print, because without the support that I got from both the photography industry and the outdoor industry, it would have been so easy for that body of work to remain on a hard drive and never be seen.
Yeah, the bane of all of us who capture images is never to see their potential fulfilled. In terms of fulfilling that potential, though, the images that I've seen output, and I haven't browsed through the book, but I have seen some images. They're in black and white. What was the thinking that went behind that? Because the images that I traditionally associate you with, you speak about taking frames at sunset or at sunrise and capturing those magnificent colours, yet black and white sang through so strongly from those images from the Karakoram. Tell me about that decision.
Well, it was quite simple, and I think one of the challenges for any photographer that's planning to photograph mountains that are at altitude is that wherever you go in the world, you've generally got 2 colours to work with: blue and white, blue and white, blue and white, and it becomes quite monotonous. And you've probably picked up many mountaineering books over your lifetime, and they tend, despite that these climbers are in places that I can't reach because I'm not a technical climber, but the imagery tends to be very much the same, and you've perhaps got a climber with some red on them and a yellow tent, and so I kind of felt that the monochrome palette was better suited to the simple graphics that are in the Karakoram. And so what I've done is that I kind of majored on black and white, but I've used also the strongest colour shots that I took in the Karakoram.
Right.
And it's to try and help break the pace up of the book.
Right, yes.
Because normally in a book in Scotland, I would be looking for the big pictures with a small amount of what I refer to as intimate landscapes. So, because the viewer or the reader of the book interacts with images like that in a different way. There's a different mapping in them. They're essentially images with no horizon, so they're navigated in a different way, and it helps change the pace in the book. And I used about half a dozen shots of some of the porters in my groups over the year, and again it was just to bring a bit of the culture into the book, and also again to change the pace of it. And I think if you're working in a book, it's so important that you're refreshing the experience between pages as often as necessary.
Of course, and that's fascinating. I've never, while taken lots of images, I've never had the privilege of being able to create a narrative across a whole book. And in the same way with a drama serial, you might have episodes that help to pace out the action and create a narrative arc across the whole series. Sounds like exactly the same concept that you're taking there. The other thing, and you mentioned it when you were describing the Karakoram Mountains, is that the buildings, the cathedrals that appear there, the black and white creates that sense of architecture almost, which I found very, very fitting to how you described it just there. Colin, we're out of time for now, but listen, fascinating to chat with you. Thank you very much for coming to the photography show. I know you've probably only just got here and you'll be having a look around though, but what do you make of the show so far, of the programme that you're aware of, and this buzz of people getting excited about image making and image taking?
Well, it's great to see so many people here. I mean, the aisles have been busy, particularly just on the run up to lunchtime. I think there's a lot of passion here. I think this show brings together people that are really very passionate about making imagery, and sometimes it's easy to forget when you look around the stands. And photography obviously is it's a subject where equipment is debated so much more than conventional art forms like painting or drawing or other media. Photography, it's the equipment that plays a big part of it. So, but beyond the hardware out there, there's a real passion I feel in this community for people that are dedicated to creating imagery, because photography gives you that conduit. It's a personal conduit for the way you feel about some aspect of the world, and that's what makes it so exciting.
Colin, thank you for bringing your passion to the photography show. Great to meet you. Hope to catch up again soon.
Pleasure.
Thank you.